We focus today on the rich man, the young man who came to Jesus and asked what he needed to do in order to gain eternal life. The story tells us that Jesus looked at him and loved him. And he told him to give away all that he had and come follow Jesus. And the young man drops his head and is sad, according to the reading, because he has many possessions. A lot of us assume that the young man didn't want to follow Jesus because he didn't want to give up what he had. But that may not be what is in the story. I think it's worth the effort of asking some questions around this. Was he sad because he didn't want to give up his possessions, or was he sad because he had so many it was going to take him time in order to be able to follow Jesus? And I look at myself and I think, what have I and will I give up in order to be a follower of Jesus? In my case, I gave up everything. I moved to the monastery. I had given up all of my possessions, given up some of those intimate relationships with my children. I left my son. My son did not leave me, although he was an adult when I left. So those are things that I gave up in order to follow Jesus more closely. As the story goes on, though, it's interesting. The disciples are concerned about themselves. We gave up everything, Peter tells Jesus. And Jesus says, well, you will have more things. If you give up houses, property, family members, those kinds of things, you'll have those in abundance in the next age. The one thing that we don't really focus on, though, is the very last thing that Jesus says we will have in abundance in the next age, and that is persecution. We will suffer persecution for the sake of following Jesus. The disciples are astonished that Jesus would even remotely indicate that rich people find it hard to get into heaven. They have to give up a lot in order to do that. But back then, the idea that God had blessed the rich, God had blessed those that had a better station in life, and the poor people somehow had sinned, or perhaps even the handicapped had sinned, and that's why they were suffering the things that they were suffering. And Jesus turns all of that upside down and says, you must give up everything to follow me. If I've ever felt persecuted in my life, it's not about what I gave up. The way I feel persecuted, I live in a first world country where most of us are pretty much safe. So I have an opportunity to kind of look a little more deeply into myself. My persecutions come from within, not from without. Yeah, it's hard to be away from my family, and yeah, it's difficult to to see Apple products out there that I would love to own, or those kinds of things that I can't do. I don't feel particularly persecuted. I've made those choices. The things that persecute me are the voices in my head that say I'm not enough. I'll never be able to become holy. I'll never be able to get into the right relationship with God. And I have to ask myself the question, what's the right relationship? I think God has a relationship with everything, and everything individually and as a whole. So I try to look at the perspective that I have, the times that I feel persecuted within myself, the times that I feel joy within myself and in my community. And I think about the first reading. The first reading talks about giving up everything for the pursuit of wisdom. Wisdom isn't the same as knowledge, and wisdom isn't the same as intelligence either. Wisdom is a memory. It's knowing on the deepest level something that you've always known. And we give up a lot to seek that wisdom. The wisdom of God's love. There's a poem by Jessica Powell that puts it this way. The love of God. My thoughts of you are fair as precious stones out of the memory's deep mysteries, mines. I cut and polish, hold the gems up to the light, the color of sea, the color of wine, from the earth's sweetest fruits. I drop them down into my heart, into lifted hands of love, whose lone concern is your renown. Giving up all to find gifts of love that draws us back to our family, our friends, and especially our global community is the call of wisdom. Can you hear it?